Joining me with the latest is GB News host Patrick Christys. Patrick, thanks for joining me. How are you doing?
Thank you. Yes, I'm very well, thank you. Exciting times here, exciting times.
Good. Hey, exciting for you, but not so exciting for Rishi Sunak. It's not looking good for the Conservatives.
No, so the polls show a mixture of the Conservative Party being 23 points behind or 12 points behind. What the Prime Minister has decided to do is throw the kitchen sink at it. So he's gone for national service, which would mean that anyone who's 18 years old would either have to serve in our military or do community work like delivering prescriptions to the elderly one weekend every single month. This has gone down quite well with older voters, less so, as you would imagine, with younger voters, and there's a lack of clarity. Would this, for example, mean that half of the England football team would have to actually take a year out to do national service? We await clarity on that, but they are slightly boosted in the polls by the fact that the Labour Party has decided to do some mental stuff, like allowing 16-year-olds to have the vote, and not bothering to explain to anyone exactly why they should actually have that. They are saying that if 16-year-olds can pay tax and can serve on the front line, then they should be able to vote. The problem is that very few 16-year-olds actually pay tax and none of them serve on the front line. This is seen as a shameless attempt to try to load the dice in the socialist direction in Britain for generations to come and would fundamentally change the landscape of British politics forever.
Well, speaking of shamelessly begging for votes, the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party has been caught on film practically pleading for Muslim votes. Have a look at this.
If me resigning as an MP now would bring a ceasefire, I would do it. I would do it. And if Labour get into power, we will recognise Palestine. I will push not only to recognise, but there is nothing to recognise at the moment, sadly. It's decimated. We have to rebuild.
Patrick, this could be the Deputy Prime Minister of the UK 5 weeks from now. What on earth is she doing? Did I hear her right? Did she say she would resign her position in Parliament if it could cause a ceasefire to break out in Gaza?
Honestly, look, can I ask you to sponsor me when I claim asylum in Australia in a few years' time, please? This is absolutely horrendous what's going on here. The most visible sign yet that I've ever seen of British politics on the left taking the knee to Islam, surrounded by a load of Muslim men in what looked like the back room of a mosque who couldn't even look at her, not a woman in sight, highlighting the sectarianism and I would argue sexism at the moment among certain quarters in British politics. That is the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, the woman who could be our Deputy Prime Minister, saying that she would resign, the Labour Party would recognise Palestine as a state. Salman Rushdie himself came out and said that we are seeing support for Hamas growing in that region. All the opinion polls over there suggest it. So a recognised free Palestinian state would be an internationally recognised terrorist state, which does not seem like a particularly good idea to me. We have at the moment independent candidates running for election at this election with the Palestinian flag behind them and the slogan, "Lend Gaza your vote." We had police officers smashed in the face with a glass. They've suffered serious facial injuries at a pro-Palestine protest just the other day. The Labour Party has decided that they want to win these people back, just wave them off. What the problem is for Labour is that they courted the Muslim vote in Britain, which has been growing steadily now for decades. They took it for granted. That vote has turned against them, and now they will literally do anything to get it back, including begging a room full of men for their vote. Spoiler alert, she won't get it anyway.
Unbelievable stuff. Hey, one more thing. Rishi Sunak, before he called the election, one of the last things he did was to pass emergency legislation banning anyone under 18 from being prescribed puberty blockers. Now, the NHS has already stopped prescribing them. Now, however, any doctor in the UK who prescribes these drugs to minors will be struck off. The ban lasts until September 3rd. Why is it emergency legislation and what happens after September 3rd?
Yeah, well, it's emergency legislation because it is an emergency, I'm afraid. We've had Wild West doctors handing out puberty blockers like they were candy at a sweet shop, and it's been going on for too long. And what we are now seeing is the backlash to that from people who say I was vulnerable, I had co-issues such as things, unfortunately, like autism, etc., or other conditions that perhaps in some ways led them down that direction, and there was a ready supply of doctors who were willing to take drastic action. There is a massive fear about what happens after this general election. Would a Labour Party that, again, has courted a certain demographic of the pro-LGBT brigade there, would they renege on some of these issues? But they have already said they do, though, is make it easier for anyone who's over the age of 18 to legally change gender. That is a good line of attack for the Conservative Party, that if you vote Labour, conceivably you will have more men in women's changing rooms. But when it comes to the kids, that is a massive concern, and it remains to be seen exactly what will happen, whether we will go back to doctors prescribing that medication.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see if Australian politicians are watching what's happening there in the UK and whether we'll ever get an inquiry into puberty blockers in this country. Patrick, thanks so much for your time.